Rhaegor's eyes glinted with malice as he secured Peter to the alien milking apparatus, chuckling as the human buck's defiant last words echoed in his ears. "You damn Xenos have no idea what you're in for." Peter Perry, a rugged and resourceful Earthman, had been going about his life as usual when the Brunali scooped him up and brought him here to Rhaegor's domain. The reptilian warmonger wasted no time revealing why Peter had been abducted. Human male nectar, semen, turned out to be the most valuable substance in the galaxy. It had potent youth-restoring and life-extending effects on alien physiology. The Brunali planned to harvest it from human studs, like livestock. "You're our first and only human buck so far," Rhaegor hissed, baring his fangs in a wicked grin. "But not the last. With your nectar empowering us, we Brunali will reign supreme over the stars. And you, my friend, will spend the rest of your days strapped into this rig, being milked." Peter struggled against his bonds, the reality of his dire situation sinking in. These scaly bastards wanted to exploit him as breeding stock, a semen cow. And if they succeeded in harvesting his nectar, they would grow their power and move on to capturing more human males. He had to find a way out of this, not just for himself, but for all of Earth. As the milking machines whirred to life, Peter gritted his teeth and tried to calm his mind. This was going to get ugly before it got better, but one way or another, he would find a way to turn the tables on these reptilian freaks. He just had to bide his time, stay sharp, and exploit any weakness or opportunity that presented itself. What Rhaegor and his lackeys failed to realize was that humans were the most stubborn, unpredictable, strong-willed beings in the galaxy. Peter's story was far from over, and this primitive Earthman would show these scaly bastards what humans were made of. His escape could change the course of the galaxy. The milking apparatus hummed ominously as it powered up, its plastic tubes snaking towards Peter with repulsive intent. But before the machine could violate him, Rhaegor held up a scaly hand. "Not so fast, Earthling. You have one more task before your new life as breeding stock begins." The reptilian overlord's eyes glinted cruelly. "We need more of your kind, and you're going to help us get them." Peter sneered defiantly. "If you think I'm going to betray my own species, you're even dumber than you look." Rhaegor just chuckled, a sinister sound. "Oh, you will, because if you don't, I'll set this machine to pulverize. Believe me, human, you'll be begging to cooperate once you see the setting we use on the unruly ones." The Brunali guards dragged Peter to a recording room, shoving him in front of a camera. Rhaegor handed him a script, a honeyed recruitment pitch full of lies about adventure and glory in the stars. Peter felt his stomach churn at the thought of luring his fellow humans into this nightmare. As the camera rolled, Peter read the lines woodenly, his mind racing. He had to find a way to warn Earth. In a flash of desperate inspiration, he began working in subtle references, quotes from old Earth literature, hints about the Brunali's true nature. To the untrained ear, it would sound innocuous, but Peter prayed Earth's military leaders would pick up on his clues. "And that's why I urge all able-bodied men to answer the call," Peter finished, putting a mocking lilt on the last word. Rhaegor's eyes narrowed as he reviewed the footage. Suddenly, he slammed a fist down on the console. "You sneaky mammal! You think your pitiful codes will save your world?" He leaned in close, his fetid breath washing over Peter. "Our fleet is already on its way. By the time your people realize what's happening, we'll have hundreds of you in chains. And you, my friend, have earned yourself a trip to the harvesting chambers." Under a phalanx of guards, Peter was marched down dank corridors to a cavernous room that reeked of despair. Row after row of males from various species hung suspended from machinery, their naked bodies hooked up to grotesque devices that pumped and pulsed. Their eyes were dull, their spirits broken. Rhaegor noticed Peter staring at the wretched captives. "Impressive, isn't it? We've been harvesting nectar from males across the galaxy, but none of these pathetic specimens can match a human. A single ounce of your seed is worth more than these dregs produce in a month." Peter felt rage course through him as the guards strapped him into a milking rig, the chemicals they used to keep the prisoners docile thick in the dank air. But as the drugs entered his system, Peter noticed something. They weren't affecting him like the other captives. His human physiology must be resisting. He fought to keep his expression slack, not wanting to alert his captors. A sudden blaring alarm pierced the room. The Brunali guards looked around in confusion, barking panicked orders. Peter seized his chance, flexing his muscles and feeling the straps loosen. With a roar, he burst free, pummeling the nearest guard into submission. Peter ripped the harvesting rig apart with his bare hands, sparks and fluid spraying. Reaching up, he hit the master release, and all around him, dazed and emaciated captives dropped from their bonds. "We're getting out of here. Grab a weapon and follow me," Peter bellowed. The other prisoners rallied to him, a righteous rage overtaking their previously broken spirits. They mobbed the guards, beating them down and taking their firearms. As the ragtag band fought their way through the facility, downing every Brunali in their path, Peter grabbed a cowering technician. "The fleet heading to Earth. Where is it launching from?" The tech spelled out coordinates, and Peter memorized them instantly. He had to find a ship, escape, and somehow reach Earth before the invasion commenced. Charging into the spaceport, Peter spotted a blockade runner that could make the journey. But a roar from behind signaled Rhaegar was closing in, a small army of Brunali shock troops at his back. The Overlord's eyes blazed with fury. "Release the human!" Rhaegar screamed. "He's more valuable than your pitiful lives combined." Laser bolts sizzled through the air as Brunali reinforcements swarmed in from all sides to head off the escapees' desperate rush. Peter and the prisoners returned fire, downing the guards and fighting their way towards the ship. But more kept coming, an endless tide of enemies. Peter gritted his teeth and emptied his rifle into the lead Brunali, clearing a path. "Get to the ship, I'll hold them off." As his fellow survivors raced up the ramp, Peter stood alone against the onslaught, a one-man army fighting to protect the ragtag refugees of 100 worlds. Rhaegar snarled in rage, aiming his blaster. This lowly earthling would not foil his plans, not when the conquest of humanity was so close he could taste it. Peter slammed the throttle forward, the stolen Brunali transport lurching as it blasted away from the harvesting facility. Alarms blared through the cockpit as enemy fighters screamed into pursuit. "Hang on!" Peter shouted to the ragtag group of escapees. "This is going to get bumpy!" He juked the ship hard to port, narrowly avoiding a barrage of plasma bolts. The vessel groaned under the strain as Peter pushed it beyond its limits, weaving through asteroid fields and diving into dense gas clouds to shake their pursuers. But the Brunali were relentless. A massive battlecruiser loomed ahead, its weapons ports glowing ominously. Peter gritted his teeth, plotting an impossible course between the cruiser's spread of fire. They were almost clear when a lucky shot clipped their rear deflector. The ship lurched violently. "Hyperdrive's down!" one of the alien refugees called out. "We're sitting ducks!" Peter's mind raced. They couldn't outrun or outgun the Brunali fleet, but maybe they could outsmart them. "There!" He pointed to a swirling purple nebula on the navigational display. "We can lose them in there. Mask our signature and drift to that way station on the edge of Brunali space." It was a risky move, but their only chance. Peter plunged the ship into the nebula's roiling gases. Visibility dropped to zero as tendrils of cosmic dust enveloped them. For agonizing minutes, they flew blind, relying on Peter's instincts alone. Suddenly, a massive shape loomed out of the purple haze. "Brace for impact!" Peter yelled, hauling back on the controls. They skimmed the hull of a derelict vessel by mere meters. As the nebula thinned, Peter brought them alongside the hulk. "I'm reading an airlock. We might find supplies in there." After docking, Peter led a small team aboard. The ship's corridors were dark and silent, littered with debris. In the cargo hold, they hit pay dirt. Crates of contraband, including a portable hyperdrive and data rods stamped with Brunali military codes. Back on their own ship, Peter's crew worked feverishly to install the salvaged hyperdrive. Meanwhile, he plugged the data rods into the computer. His blood ran cold as he decrypted the transmissions. "It's worse than we thought," he announced grimly. "The fleet heading for Earth is just the first wave. They're gathering over 1,000 warships to turn humanity into a giant breeding farm. The enormity of the threat hit home. They had to warn Earth, rally a defense before it was too late. But as Peter plotted their route, another obstacle emerged. "We'll have to cut through Drenth in space," he said. "Ruled by the meanest criminal cartel in the sector. Our only shot is to make a deal with their boss." Days later, Peter stood in Kovacs's opulent throne room aboard a fortified space station. The alien crime lord's compound eyes glittered with greed as Peter explained their situation. "I'll grant you safe passage," Kovacs's translators buzzed. "In exchange for your hyperdrive, and you, human, the first of your kind will make an excellent trophy and breeding stock." Peter's crew protested, but he silenced them with a look. They had no choice. "Deal," Peter said, his voice tight. Within hours, Peter found himself stripped and subjected to humiliating processing by Kovacs's medical droids. As they poked and prodded, preparing him for a life of captive breeding, Peter forced himself to stay calm. He had to bide his time, gather intel, find a way out. Meanwhile, his crew was marooned on a barren asteroid, frantically working on a long-shot rescue plan. With each passing day, Peter drew closer to being activated as Kovacs's prize stud, and all the while, the Brunali Armada inched ever nearer to an unsuspecting Earth. Peter stared out the viewport of his lavish prison cell, eyes hardened. The fate of humanity rested on his shoulders. Somehow, he had to find a way to escape, warn his homeworld, and rally a defense against the Brunali. The clock was ticking. Peter's muscles tensed as he stood naked in Kovacs's opulent chambers, the cold metal of the collar biting into his neck. The Drenthan crime lord circled him, compound eyes glittering with avarice. "First human male breeding sample," Kovacs's translator buzzed. "Worth more than this entire outpost, but buyers want proof of potency." Kovacs's appendage snaked out, grasping a device with wicked-looking attachments. Peter's stomach lurched as he realized its purpose. "No way in hell!" Peter snarled, batting the device away. Kovacs shrieked in rage, lunging at Peter. They collided in a tangle of limbs, crashing into an ornate display case. Glass shattered as Peter grappled with the surprisingly strong alien. Rolling across the floor, Peter's hand closed around Kovacs's dropped sidearm. He wrenched free, stumbling to his feet and firing wildly. Kovacs screamed as energy bolts scorched his carapace. Peter sprinted for the door, blasting the control panel. Alarms blared as he raced down twisting corridors, bare feet slapping against cold metal. Shouts echoed behind him as Kovacs's guards gave chase. Rounding a corner, Peter skidded to a halt. Two hulking cyborgs blocked his path, artificial eyes gleaming. He dove as they opened fire, energy bolts sizzling overhead. Scrambling into a side passage, Peter's mind raced. He needed a plan, and fast. Up ahead, he spotted a sign for the medical bay. Perfect. Inside, Peter rifled through cabinets, grabbing vials and mixing chemicals with desperate speed. The door burst open as he finished, guards pouring in with weapons raised. Peter hurled his makeshift grenades, choking smoke filling the air. The guards fired blindly as Peter slipped past, snatching a handful of hypo sprays on his way out. In the corridor, Peter jabbed the hypo sprays into exposed alien flesh as he ran. His pursuers howled in agony as the drugs took effect, their biology reacting violently to the human medications. Pausing to catch his breath, Peter overheard comm chatter. His crew was making their move, fighting their way into the outpost. He had to find that hyperdrive. After several tense minutes of cat and mouse through the station, Peter finally reached the storage bay. He yanked on his flight suit and boots, sighing in relief as he found the hyperdrive. The reactor core hummed ominously as Peter entered, cradling the precious device. A dozen Praetorian cyborgs waited, weapons trained on him. "Surrender, human," their leader intoned. Peter's eyes darted to the reactor controls. It was insane, but his only shot. He lunged, slamming his palm down on the overload sequence. Klaxons wailed as the reactor went critical. In the chaos, Peter's crew burst in, laying down covering fire. He sprinted for their ship as the station shuddered around them. They barely cleared the hangar as the first explosions rocked the outpost. Peter strapped in, hands flying over the controls. A massive shockwave buffeted them as they jumped to hyperspace, the outpost vanishing in a brilliant fireball behind them. But their reprieve was short-lived. As they dropped out of hyperspace, long-range sensors lit up. "Oh God," Peter breathed. The Brunali invasion force filled the screen, a vast armada of warships surging towards Earth. "We'll never outrun them in this bucket," their pilot growled. Peter's eyes sharp. "Then we go through them. Plot a course. We're jumping straight down their throat." As they hurtled towards certain death, Peter could only pray they'd reach Earth in time to sound the alarm. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. Peter's stolen ship dropped out of hyperspace, Earth's blue orb filling the view screen. But there was no time for relief. The Brunali armada loomed behind them, a swarm of deadly warships ready to unleash hell. "This is Peter Wilson to Earth Defense Command," Peter barked into the comms. "Brunali invasion force inbound. We need every ship we've got." Within minutes, Peter stood before a hastily assembled war council. Grim-faced admirals and generals listened as he laid out humanity's dire situation. "Our only chance is to hit them where it hurts," Peter said, pulling up schematics of the Brunali flagship. "I'll lead a strike team to capture their leader, Regor. We sow chaos in their ranks. We might have a shot." Hours later, Peter crouched in the cramped confines of a stealth shuttle, his team of hardened commandos checking their gear one last time. The massive bulk of the Brunali flagship loomed ahead, energy weapons stabbing out at the beleaguered Earth defense fleet. "Go time," Peter whispered. They burst from the shuttle, mag boots clamping to the flagship's hull. Peter's plasma torch made short work of an access hatch. They dropped inside, weapons at the ready. Alarms blared as they fought their way through twisting corridors. Brunali security forces fell before their relentless advance. Peter's heart pounded as they neared the command center. "Breach!" he shouted. The door exploded inward. Peter dove through the smoke, his rifle spitting death. Rieger's Praetorian Guard crumpled under the assault. And there he was, Rigor himself, those cruel eyes widening in shock as Peter's team swarmed the command center. "It's over," Peter snarled, pressing his rifle to Rieger's head. But as they secured their prisoner, Peter noticed something odd. A bank of medical equipment, vials of glowing fluid. He snatched one up, horror dawning as he recognized the sickly, sweet scent. "What is this?" Peter demanded. Regor laughed, a harsh sound. "The future, refined human essence, our greatest weapon and most potent drug." Peter's grip tightened on his rifle. "Talk! Now!" Under interrogation, Regor spilled everything. How he'd been secretly dosing key commanders, ensuring their addiction and loyalty. Peter's mind raced. This was their chance. "To the cyber warfare suite," he ordered. "We're going to light this powder keg." Peter's team worked feverishly, unleashing viruses to cripple the Brunali fleet's systems. On screens around them, they watched as the invasion force tore itself apart. Ship turned against ship as word of Regor's betrayal spread. "Now!" Peter shouted into his comms. "All ships, attack!" Earth's defenders surged forward, hammering the disorganized Brunali. Explosions bloomed in the void as humanity fought for its very existence. A proximity alarm shrieked. Peter's blood ran cold as he saw what Regor had done. A massive quantum missile primed and aimed at Earth. "No!" Peter roared. What followed was a desperate race. Peter threw everything he had at that missile, watching in anguish as Allied ships sacrificed themselves to knock it off course. The missile detonated, its blast wave catching the outer edges of Earth's defenders. In the aftermath, as the remaining Brunali ships fled, Peter stood amid the wreckage of the flagship's bridge. The cost had been staggering, but they had won. Humanity endured. Days later, Peter found himself on a stage before cheering crowds. Medals were pinned to his chest. Politicians made speeches about heroism and sacrifice. But Peter's thoughts were with those who hadn't made it home. As the ceremony wound down, A haggard soldier approached. "Sir," he said, voice shaking, "we've picked up transmissions from deep space. There's something out there. Something big." Peter's eyes hardened as he took the proffered datapad. The battle for Earth was over, but the war for humanity's survival had only just begun.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.